press record. Excellent. So I'm just going to the speaker view. Amazing. So thank you to those of you that have managed to make it on tonight. I am recording this because I know there's some parents really struggling to get their kiddos into bed on time. Mine are still up. I can hear them in the bathroom making a lot of noise. But I am so grateful to have Shelley on this call tonight. I'd be grateful anyway, but after the day I've had today, as a parent of neurodiversity, I said to her that in terms of timing, it couldn't have been better because it's been one of those days. And I'm sure if you're a parent on this call, you're going to relate to Shelley a lot. And when we connected, and we did a call, didn't we, a couple of weeks ago, and I was actually really emotional. I got quite tearful because I find Shelley very empowering and uplifting, which it's not very easy to feel that sometimes as a parent at the best of times. So I myself, I've got a son, Arthur, who was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 5. He's now 10 and a half. My second son is sort of going through some of that as well, diagnosis. And as an adult, now reflecting on my childhood and who I am as a person, I'm 100% ADHD. And so, yeah, it was lovely to talk to Shelley from Complex Connections. And Shelley, I'm going to hand over to you just to, if you could just introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of your experience as a parent and sort of, you know, going back and how you got into all of this and why you do what you do. And
yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. It's really lovely to connect with you here. And thanks a lot, Chloe. Yeah, so I am a mom of 2. I've got a daughter who's 21, and then I have a son who's 16, and he is diagnosed ADHD and autistic. We were referred, excuse my dog barking in the background if you can hear her. We were referred, first of all, to primary mental health all the way back when Daniel was 6. So it was a really long journey. He was only diagnosed then with ADHD when he was 11. And then actually only when he was 15 was he diagnosed with autism. So it's been a really long journey. It was a really difficult one at times. There were lots of mental health issues. There were lots of times when we were kind of discharged from a service and then had to go back to it again. And the whole way along, as much as there were some fantastic people within those services that gave us support, on the whole, I found it a very isolating and very overwhelming experience. I had trained as a teacher in South Africa, where I first lived. And I had never been trained in any kind of neurodiversity. So kind of came at it cold, had to learn as I was going, didn't find that there was a lot of information out there. Obviously, social media kind of 8 years ago was very much less than it is now. So I really couldn't find the number of charities that I emailed all over the place trying to find support. Was there a group that we could join? Just didn't find very much at all. So did a lot of late night Googling, as you tend to do, and kind of went on my own path of learning and teaching myself. By that time, I was working as a teaching assistant and then SEN support in a school. So I was learning through that process as well, and being horrified at obviously some of the lack of support in school. But yeah, just trying to kind of take in as much as I could. And then I decided that I was going to set up Complex Connections 2 years ago. That was February of 2020. Set up Complex Connections really to try and provide a community for parents like myself and almost offer what I felt that I had needed. And I've delivered a couple of online courses. Obviously, COVID hit, so everything was delayed and plans were changed. But I have delivered a few courses online. They were other people's courses, and I've now decided to kind of put everything that I've learned, the training, what's been most valuable to my family, put it all into my own course. So that's kind of the elements of that is what I'm going to chat to you about tonight. But I'm not standing here in front of you as somebody who has it all sussed and doesn't have any challenges anymore? Absolutely not. I still have ongoing challenges. You know, every new stage, every new age brings its own kind of challenges. So really, I'm just trying to share the things that my family have found useful. And actually, 2 weeks ago, I was diagnosed ADHD. So that's been a real light bulb moment, because I had never, ever considered that I was neurodivergent. But obviously, you know, kind of learned a few things through my son, still didn't click. And then in my journey as a small business owner, have met loads of neurodivergent women. And I think the difficulties that I were having really came to a head when I was running my own business. And that's obviously when I went down the path and got diagnosed myself. So I feel now that that kind of adds an extra layer to myself. And it's as I say, it's only 2 weeks ago. So it's kind of, you know, all in the stages of sort of speaking to people about it and letting people know, seeing people's reactions. And it's very different being a parent of a neurodivergent young person and then discovering that you're neurodivergent yourself. So yeah, lots and lots of learning, always learning new stuff. I went through a stage where I found it really difficult to kind of talk about neurodivergence, because there were a lot of groups that were saying, oh, you have to speak about it this way, and this is really offensive, and this is not the way you talk about it. And I found that really difficult. I was so worried about offending people. And I'm now of the opinion that we just have to talk about it. We just have to get out there, speak to other people, connect with people that get it, and we'll work it out as we go along, because there's so much that we can learn. And once we learn, that's when we become empowered, and that's when we can make a difference. That's when we can change things. So that's me. And I'm in Ponteland in Northumberland. So I'm far away from all of you, way up north. So amazing. Yeah.
Oh, no, it's lovely to hear all that background. So, so what do you want to do tonight, Shelley? Have you got some slides, or did you want to talk about complex connections first and how that works? Or
no, I'll go through my slides if that's okay with you, Chloe, and I'll just talk about the kind of 3 elements that I that have kind of are the ones that stick with me. I don't know if you want to have any questions as we go along, or if you want me just to go through and then have questions at the end. I'm entirely fine with anything.
Yeah, well, if I encourage people to, if you want to put your comments in the chat box as we go along, as it sort of comes up or pops into your head, put them in the chat box, and then we can go through them at the end, and then you can unmute yourselves if there's other things that come up. Similarly on Facebook, if you're watching on there, because we've got a few watching on there as well. So yeah, that would be great. But I've made you co-host, Shelley, so
brilliant, thank you.
Just be able to share it.
Share my screen.
When your dog was barking, my dog was under the desk and she started going,
oh, could you hear?
Who's there?
Right, give me 1 second, because true to form.
Yes.
The thing that I need now doesn't seem to be there. Give me 1 second.
Ah, it's the old technology.
Yes.
Fun. Yeah.
There we go. I've got it. Okay. Can everybody see that? Yeah, fabulous. Okay, so really, when through all my learning and through you know, working in my family, the word that I kept coming back to was connection. So that is what I have focused on, and that is what I kind of base complex connections on. Obviously the name, complex connections, acknowledging that it is really tough, that parenting a child who has additional needs and additional struggles is really difficult. Any kind of parenting is difficult, but that adds extra things to it. Brené Brown is somebody that I often listen to, and she says we are hardwired to connect with others. It's what gives purpose and meaning to our lives, and without it, there is suffering. And I truly believe that is right for ourselves and for our young people. This is another one that I found. Expecting a child to cooperate without connection is like expecting a flower to grow without sun and water. I actually am not very keen on that word cooperate. It has a few negative kind of connotations, and I would rather use the word flourish in there. So without that connection with parents, with other significant adults, it is really difficult for a child to flourish. So the three elements that I kind of base complex connections on are understanding, communication, and connection. And all three of those are obviously very interlinked. All three of them kind of work with each other, but I think there's a natural order of understanding first, then communicating, and then connecting, and then everything works together. I also have another really clear focus in complex connections, and that is that looking after yourself first and foremost is absolutely essential. It's not an optional part of the process. It's an absolutely vital part of the process, because without understanding yourself, connecting to yourself, communicating positively with yourself and empowering yourself, it's very, very difficult for you to be able to do that for your young person. So like Dr. Phil says, you have to take care of yourself before you can take care of others. So if we look at understanding, and you'll see that the way that I've structured this, I've done each of the three elements, but with you first. So what I've said here is that for yourself, it's really important that you are curious, first of all. And that word curious, I think, really describes when we are open, when we are willing to alter what we think we know, what we think the outcome will be, when we are able to kind of imagine or open ourselves up to new possibilities, that is being curious. So when we are willing to be curious and look at our own responses and really understand ourselves, that would be the first step. And this allows us then to be able to let go of the judgments that we've made about ourselves, and also the judgments that other people might make about us. So when we look at our own emotions, we look at our own triggers, we are then able to have compassion for ourselves. And I think this is absolutely vital. I think, like we said, when you are the parent of a neurodivergent young person, you have that extra layer of challenge. You may often feel like I did, like I still do sometimes, feel overwhelmed, feel isolated, feel that none of your friends are going through a similar thing. Nobody that you know can really understand what it's like in your family. You may also feel that you have to solve your young person's problems, that you are there to fix whatever the difficulty is. And you end up trying to keep everybody happy. And at the end of the day, the person that gets put on the back burner is yourself. So you're making sure that your child is fine, you're making sure that the siblings are fine, that your partner's okay, that everybody else is taken care of, and you yourself go on the back burner. And what happens then is that you either run on empty, so your patience is worn out, you're running on empty, you've got nothing left to give anybody. What also happens is that emotions within us can be triggered by how our young person is behaving, or what they say, or things that happen at school. Sometimes, things that crop up for them, the difficulties that crop up for them, may be something that really triggers us. And I was reading something about triggers the other day, and they were saying that it's kind of emotions and trauma that have not been dealt with within ourselves. And I'm sure you find this as well. Sometimes you'll be doing something, and on the spur of the moment, something flares in you, some kind of anger or real emotional, overly emotional reaction to something that's gone on. And I think that the first step is for us to understand ourselves, is to look at those things within ourselves. Even if it's not a case of dealing with the triggers, it's being aware of them, so that we can take steps so that we don't get triggered, or we lessen that impact of being triggered in those situations. And I think also having a look at how we are caring for ourselves, because, as I say, if we are running on empty, if we've got nothing left to give, we are of no use to anybody. There's always that analogy that's used, isn't there, of the when you're in the aeroplane and they tell you to put on your own gas mask first. And parents kind of feel that that's really selfish, but without us doing that and looking after ourselves, we're of no use to our children. So we have to look after ourselves first. And I think that understanding yourself is a really important part of that. I think also connecting with others who understand is vital. Finding those people who nourish you, the people who understand you, the people who, when you come away from them, that you have that renewed energy. It can be really easy to fall into the trap of listening to other people's kind of negative reactions to your child, and kind of that negativity around parenting, and all that does is bring us down. So we need those people that we can connect with who understand and will offer us the right kind of support. I think as well, for me, there's that element of forgiveness of yourself. So understanding that when you didn't know about these things, you did things in a certain way. There's many, many things that I have done and ways that I've dealt with things, which I look back now and think, oh, why did I do that? And it can be really easy to beat yourself up about it, but it's almost letting go of that and saying, now that I know better, now I'll do differently. But it's, kind of not hanging on to those feelings. And then the second part of understanding is understanding your young person, and exactly the same elements come up. Be curious, work out what are their strengths, what are their struggles, what are their triggers, what are the things that really create that emotional reaction in them. I think it's understanding our young person as an individual as well, kind of seeing them not in comparison to their peers, not in comparison to their siblings, seeing them as a person and really celebrating the strengths that they have. And there will be amazing neurodivergent strengths, but sometimes it's difficult to see beyond the difficulties because those are what are coming up every day. So when they go to school and they're struggling with organization, or they're struggling with timekeeping, or they're struggling to get their homework done, or whatever it is, those are the big things that tend to kind of push the strengths aside. And I think if we can understand them and understand what it is that shines within them, we can then kind of look at that and focus on those things. We have to be willing to alter our perspective as well. So yes, society values certain things like organization, timekeeping, conscientious work. Society has put a lot of value on those things. Our young people may not have those as their strengths, and it's being able to say, okay, that doesn't matter. We'll work on those, we'll support those. Let's find what does matter. Let's find what really gets that young person passionate about things. Let's find what their strengths are, their individual strengths. And when you can give them that confidence because of that strength, I think it's absolutely phenomenal for them. I think as well, along with understanding, is the thing about misunderstanding their behavior. There's that saying that says that all behavior is communication. Now, I completely agree with that, although there's obviously certain types of behavior. If a young person has Tourette's, which they're not trying to communicate anything, it's just an indication of their difficulties. But I think what we need to do is look beyond what we see on the surface. We have to remember things like the 3 to 5 year gap. For our neurodivergent brains, they will be, by the time they're kind of at the start of secondary school, 3 to 5 years behind in development in terms of emotional development and that kind of thing compared to their neurotypical peers. If we don't remember that, we have certain expectations because they happen to be 12 or 15 or whatever it happens to be. We have certain expectations of what they should be able to do at that age. And we have to remember that their brains are those few years behind. So if we're looking at what we expect of a 12-year-old, we could in effect be saying, well, would I expect that of an 8 or 9-year-old? And the answer often may be no, but we expect it because they're of a certain age. So I think it's remembering that 3 to 5 year gap, remembering that there are real brain differences in a neurodivergent brain. For instance, the prefrontal cortex, the part at the front, develops much later. Even in a neurotypical young person, that part of the brain, which is the part that controls the organization, the timekeeping, the prioritizing, that part of the brain is only fully developed when they are in their mid-20s. So it's even a few years later for our neurodivergent brains. Things like the environment, how much sensory issues can affect our young person, and that may cause them to behave in a certain way when really they are not being deliberately defiant or deliberately avoidant of something. There is really something going on for them which they may not even be aware of. Never mind us being aware of it. They may not even realize that the noise in the background, or the bright lights, or the too many people around, whatever it may be, is actually something that is triggering them. And then they lash out, or they withdraw, or they are aggressive towards people. And that's not them deliberately being like that. That is because of something that's going on in their body. And I think we need to understand those and look beyond those, what we see on the surface. As I mentioned already, there's those executive challenges and the sensory challenges. And all of those are making a massive difference for our young people all the time. So as I said before as well, behavior is that communication, it's indication of some kind of difficulty. I think anger is another one. We often see anger from our young people. And I think anger is very much a go-to emotion for human beings, but it can be an indication of something completely different to something where they're really angry about something. The behavior may show anger, but what they're actually feeling is possibly disappointment or loneliness or feeling left out or feeling unheard. All of those things can manifest as anger, and we tend to kind of tell them off for being aggressive, or obviously if they're at school and they lash out, that's unacceptable. But we need to look beyond what we're seeing and look down and see what is actually going on for them. I think as well, as a parent, I definitely felt this for a really long time. You often see your young person's behavior as a reflection of you, and you see it as a reflection of your parenting skills. So if they are playing up, or if they are misbehaving, or they are not conforming in a way that they're expected to, you see it as a reflection of yourself, which actually is a trigger. That was definitely a trigger for me. And that's part of this whole understanding process, is being able to let go of those judgments and go, that's my child, this is what they're experiencing right now, this is what's contributing to this kind of emotion or this kind of behavior. You're looking beyond what you're seeing on the surface and not taking it personally, which is really difficult to do. I think when we understand as well that with our neurodivergent young person, we are going to be scaffolding them a lot longer. They are not going to be independent in a lot of things as quickly as their neurotypical peers. When we understand that and we understand the reasons behind it, we can accept it and we can work with that. I think when you don't have that understanding, that's when it causes a lot of reaction in yourself, because you don't know why they're not able to do what their neurotypical peers can do. I think as well, another thing that I wanted to mention around understanding is how relationships in the family can be affected. I think I saw a lot of this in my family with sibling relationships. So you often have siblings who may become resentful of how much time a parent is having to spend with the neurodivergent young person. And on the other hand, you have a neurodivergent young person seeing all the things that their neurotypical brother or sister is achieving. So they may have a big group of friends, they may be excelling at school, they may be sailing through things and finding things really easy and able to engage in activities that your neurodivergent young person finds really difficult, and that can fuel resentment as well. So it's just understanding all of those things. And when we alter our own perspective, then we can do something different about it. And that brings us on to communication. So again, I've started with communicating with ourselves. And there I say, make that communication empowering for yourself. See that you have choices. don't feel that you are bound by the difficulties and bound by the challenges. You have choices, and you have different ways that you can see things. I think also letting go of that obligatory language is really important. We hear so many shoulds. I should be this kind of parent. I have to do this for my child, otherwise I'm not a good parent. Children of this age should be doing this. If my child does that, I should be responding in a certain way. None of it is helpful. I was bound by that language for so many years, and it did nothing to support me or my son or our family. And I think it was really liberating when I could say, and I wouldn't say I'm completely liberated from it. I think as human beings, we feel the judgments from other people. But when we can see that, when we can kind of be empowered for ourselves and feel more competent within ourselves, then we can let go of those judgments and that language. We can celebrate our own wins as well and recognize where we're doing well. I think often as a parent, any parent really, but especially with the additional challenges, you tend to see all the things you've done wrong, and you kind of beat yourselves up for where you didn't do this properly, or you didn't do that, or you failed to say what you should have said, instead of actually seeing all the things that you're doing right, and all the things that you're managing really well. I think having compassion for ourselves is really, really important, as well as being able to kind of hear our own voice. Sometimes we listen so much to what's going on around us that we fail to hear what we are telling ourselves. And I think we know to a large extent what is valuable for our young person and for our own family. And I think that's really important. Some of the principles we're talking about tonight may not be particularly relevant to your family, but it's taking out of it what is valuable and using that, and that may be different for somebody else. I think it's really listening to what your young person needs, listening to what you need, and taking those things and putting them into practice. And even if it's different to how other people do things. Just one example, I know there's a lot of talk about mobile phones and how children shouldn't have them at the table. We kind of enforced that really clearly for my son. His phone and his gaming and that kind of thing is like an escape for him. That's his safe place. And he would say to us, that he wanted to bring his phone to the table. That was the only way he could come. And we resisted it for years. And we made the rule of no phones at the table. And it eventually got to the point where he wouldn't even come to the table. And we had to make a choice that either we managed to get him to the table with his phone, or we didn't have him at all. And it felt really difficult to go against what everybody else was saying, that technology shouldn't be at the table and there has to be conversation. We had to let go of those expectations of other people. And we made the decision that he could have his phone at the table. And if he needed his headphones on, that was also fine. Most of the time, he will be looking at his phone. He will be listening to the conversation that's going on around him. He finds it really difficult to have conversations, but he will listen, and at certain points, he'll jump in on the conversation. Whereas if we had kind of stuck to that expectation of no phones at the table, we wouldn't have even had him there. So it's kind of working out what works for your family. And it may not work forever. It may work for this week or for the next month, and then you may have to change it. But it's kind of looking at that all the time and hearing your own voice and trusting yourself and knowing that you are competent enough to make those choices. I think as well, regulating ourselves and communicating in a way that regulates us is really, really important. You probably know that young children cannot self-regulate. They have to co-regulate with an adult, a significant adult, in order to learn that self-regulation. And they don't learn it for many, many years. They need to constantly be reassured, constantly be helped to kind of regulate themselves emotionally before they're able to do it. And even as adults, we still look to other people for support, and we still, need other people around us to regulate us at times. But it's really important that we are able to communicate with ourselves in a way that calms us down when we are trying to regulate our child. So rather than stepping straight into the situation and trying to calm your child down, you do it for yourself first, and you take those 3 deep breaths, or you think about what you want to do. And they talk about it as the power of the pause. And I think that it is really, really valuable. It's just that moment that you give yourself to kind of go, how am I going to respond in this situation? And I think taking that moment and then responding and looking beyond the behavior is so much better than kind of reacting in the moment and then often regretting how you've handled things. So that power of the pause is really, really powerful. Obviously, stress and anxiety hijack our executive functions. So when we are stressed, when we are feeling anxious, when we are overwhelmed, we can't think clearly. Exactly the same as our young person's brain. When they are emotional, they cannot make decisions and think clearly. So we need to get ourselves back online, connect with ourselves again, communicate calmly with ourselves so that we can be regulated, and then we can help our young person to regulate. And I think that's a really important principle. If we move on to communicating with your young person, it's exactly the same principles just for them. You are empowering them. You are giving them choices. Exactly as you took those choices for yourself, you are giving them choices. You are allowing them to make some decisions, have buy-in, to be able to be part of that communication, be part of the decision-making process. It is hugely valuable. Many of our neurodivergent young people can feel like they have no power, that they have no voice. And as a human being, what you do when you feel that you have no voice is you try to take control. So when you see them negotiating, my son is honestly the best negotiator ever. He can literally, he gets us into such a knot that I don't even know how what I was even fighting for in the beginning, because he is such a negotiator, and he does that in moments where he feels like he has to take back the power. So if we give them a voice, if we allow them to be heard, give them those choices, work with them, collaborate with them, it is absolutely vital for them to feel that they are heard. I've mentioned this already before, but kind of meet them where they are. So let go of the expectations of just because they're a certain age, just because their classmates can do something, just because that's what we expect of them. Meet them where they are. Wherever that is, meet them there and move forward from there, and get rid of those expectations and comparisons. Again, like we said, for ourselves, celebrate the wins. Don't look at all the negatives. As easy as it is to get sucked into that, celebrate the good things, celebrate those strengths, and that makes them feel empowered as well. There's a nice saying, fail forward, and I love that. If we enable and empower our young people to fail forward confidently, let them know that it's fine. Everybody makes mistakes. Yes, we're going to fail. We are going to, at some point, we're going to mess up. If you almost have that as a thing from the beginning, then they know that at some point things will go wrong. At some point something will not work out. At some point they will get overly emotional, but that's fine. Let's review it. Let's have a look at it later on, and let's work out a different way forward. It's that failing forward confidently. So we also want to empower our young people to advocate for themselves. So that's part of this whole communication thing. And I address that by being completely honest with my son. I will be honest with him about times that I feel unsure, times that I feel like I've done the wrong thing. And we have that really honest communication. And that has definitely enabled him to be able to communicate honestly as well. I think another important part of communication is almost helping our young people to recognize their emotions. Brené Brown, I've been listening to a few of her podcasts recently where she talks about if we don't have the language to say how we're feeling, we can't even recognize how we're feeling. The language that we have really shapes how we think about emotion, how we recognize emotion, and really how we feel emotion. So if we can empower our young person to know that even although they've reacted in an an angry way. Let's look beyond that. Let's find language for how were you really feeling? Were you embarrassed, or were you feeling left out, or were you feeling overwhelmed by something? What was the real reason for that? Really give them that language that they need. And then obviously setting up systems for them, helpful strategies that they can use to kind of meet those daily demands. I think habits are a vitally important part. Those tiny habits. I don't know if you've heard of James Clear or BJ Fogg. They advocate those tiny habits which we just set up, that they become part of our daily routine. I don't know about your young people, but for us, showering, teeth brushing, all that kind of thing is a really difficult process to get into. But we found that when we make it more of a habit, when it's always at a certain time, or it always follows another activity, it becomes so much easier. So it's very much part of kind of showing them what strategies can you use, even empowering them with things like, when you feel really emotional, it can be helpful to chew ice. Or when you feel really emotional, it can be really helpful to have a big hug, or do push-ups against the wall. That kind of feedback for our limbs. If we can push our arms against the wall, or something is pressed kind of deep into our muscles, that's really valuable for us, and that can help to calm us down. Empower them with that knowledge. You may not be there at a certain time, and they need to regulate themselves as they get older. So empowering them with that knowledge and teaching them those strategies is really, really important. I think just another thing that I wanted to say about emotional dysregulation. Our young people, when they become overly emotional, and this isn't just their brains, this is our brains as well, we lose the ability to listen to language. It's been proven that the language part of our brain is kind of switched off when we're very emotional. So if you have somebody talking to you in those moments, you really can't process what they're saying, let alone formulate words and sentences and speak back to them. So I'm a person that when I get really anxious, I tend to talk a lot. So in a situation where I could see my son was becoming dysregulated, I would talk and almost talk him through it, really for myself. That was to calm my own anxiety. And what I realized is that that was just contributing to the situation. That was really adding fuel to the fire. When I stepped back and switched off that language and really said very, very little, and just offered him connection with me, just offered him that space, either to be around me, if that's what would help him, or to go off and be on his own while he decompressed. That was the most valuable thing that I could do for him in that moment. So I'm not teaching him a lesson. I'm not talking to him about the situation. I'm not telling him what he's done wrong. I'm not formulating a strategy for the next time. I'm doing none of that in that moment. I'm allowing him space just to decompress. And that may take an hour, and it may take 24 hours, and it may take 2 days. And then you can have that conversation about, okay, let's have a look at that. What do you think we can do differently? How can I help you better the next time? That's when you have that conversation. I think it's been drummed into us that we almost, in the moment that a child is doing something that society doesn't see as acceptable, they need to be taught in that moment what's wrong with it. And I think that is just really destructive to our young people. They just need that time to decompress. One other thing from communication is lying. We went through a stage where lying was a big thing for Daniel. He really struggled to solve problems in the moment. And the more I learned, the more I realized that lying is exactly the same kind of response. It's an automatic response, exactly the same as flight or freeze, or all of those kind of things. It's exactly the same kind of response. It's automatic. It's in that moment. It's a safety mechanism. Because they don't know how to solve the problem in that moment, the body automatically and the brain automatically goes to lying. So it's just important to remember that, because when I understood that, then I could respond appropriately, rather than going, oh my goodness, you're still telling lies, and this is going to land you in real trouble. Rather than reacting like that, I could respond in a proper way and kind of go, okay, I can see the situation's really difficult for you. Let's take a moment, and then you can tell me what really happened, and then we can get to the bottom of it. So it lessens the shame around it, because when we load on the shame, then exactly what's going to happen the next time is they're going to lie again. They don't see that there's any other way out of that situation. So for me, that was a really important learning curve. And then the last element is connection. And again, I've started with yourself first. Having that positive understanding of yourself. When you have that positive understanding, when you feel empowered, when you are listening to yourself, when you trust yourself, when you hear your own voice, when you feel competent enough to act in a way that's the best for your child, for yourself, and for your family, that is when you are connected to yourself. That is when you can decide for yourself what works, and you can feel empowered to kind of do what's best for your young person and do what's right for your family. You can let go of other people's opinions and judgments. You can listen to people who are supportive of you. You can take on board things that are helpful for you, but you have your own voice and you feel empowered. And I think often when we have to go and advocate for our young people, when we have to go to school, when we have to go to various professionals, it's very easy to feel completely sort of overwhelmed by that and feel, well, they're the professionals, they must know what's best for my young person. But nobody knows your young person like you do. You are the expert on them. They are the real expert, and that's why we need to connect with them. But you are the one that knows them best, better than the professionals. Yes, they may have all the kind of science or the behavioral techniques, but you know what's going to fit in and work for your family. And it's really important that you hear your own voice. For your young person, it's always important to remember that as human beings, we are wired for connection. And if we don't get that connection in a positive way, we are going to seek it in a negative way. There is no way past that. If we don't receive that recognition that we crave, we will look for it even in a negative way. I've seen it so many times in the classroom where if a young person isn't acknowledged and isn't given recognition for them as a person in a positive way, they will go out of their way just to get noticed. They will misbehave, they will shout out, they will do something to get your attention because they need that connection with you. We see that so much in things like gang culture, don't we? Where young people just need to connect with somebody else, be that positive or be it negative. So if we can make that positive for our young person, we're on to a winner there. So when we are connected with our young person, we understand their individual strengths and their struggles. We know that we are empowering them through the communication. We are helping them to be able to advocate for themselves. When they get to 16, 17, like Daniel is now, he needs to be able to say to people in certain situations, I'm finding that really difficult, or I'm really struggling with that, or I have ADHD and therefore that's tough for me, or please can you give me a bit of extra time just to think about that. He has to have those skills. I am not with him. I don't get called into college now to kind of advocate on his behalf. He is expected to be able to do that kind of thing. And yes, he still needs support, and I still do it to an extent, and I'll do it for as long as he needs it. But I know that it is really important for me to empower him to advocate for himself. So when we have that empowering communication, when we're working with our child, we've got that collaboration, then we can have that connection with them. And I think just to finish on, is focusing on the relationship first. I can definitely say that when we started focusing on, we kind of asked that question in every situation, will this build out the relationship or maintain the relationship, or will it break the relationship? If that was our kind of compass, that helped us to make decisions. When we were, none of us want to be the policeman constant policeman. I was that at one point, constantly, what am I taking away now? How am I punishing for this behavior? I don't want to be that person. I want to be a mom. I don't want to have to be the enforcer of all these rules. So I think when we can build that connection and have that relationship with our young person, that is the role that we want to be in. So if you ask yourself that question, is this helping the relationship? Is this positive for the relationship? That kind of gives you a guide as to how you should do things. And I think, these principles that we have, really just to say to you that you can make the difference. I think for me, that was such a light bulb moment when I actually realized that I didn't have to wait for services. I didn't have to wait for professionals. I didn't have to get somebody else to come and fix things. I was the one that could make a difference, because when I can alter my perspective, when I can develop understanding, when I can use more empowering communication and be more positive, and when I can focus on that relationship and build that strong connection, that's how I can make a difference for Daniel. And that was really empowering for me and for him and for our whole family. It made a huge difference. And like I say, connection is not some magic wand that you just wave it and everything's absolutely fine. The challenges still come up. There's still really difficult times. There's still times when there's disconnect. But on the whole, if you focus on that connection and keep that as at the forefront of everything, I think those other challenges just become simpler. They don't go away, but they just become simpler to deal with. And you kind of find your way a lot more easily. And I think for all of us, you just, I remember many days where I felt that things were really hopeless and I didn't know how we were going to get through it, and I didn't know how he was ever going to get to the end of school, and I didn't know how we were going to connect as a family. Myself and my husband, there was a lot of conflict because of different ways and ideas that we had. But we just simplified it all and kind of brought it all back to those three elements. And even now, we still use those, and it helps us out many, many times. So that's the end of my slides, Chloe, and that's really what I had prepared to talk to you about. I'm very happy to answer any questions if I can. I'm no psychologist or behavioral expert. This is kind of the things that I've learned and the things that I've learned in the training that I've done as well. I'll just stop my screen share.
Shelley, thank you so much. Does anybody have questions they want to put in the group? I mean, I know Louise has been really engaged and she's doing a lot of work on this herself as well, and talking about she was talking about shame. She was talking about lying. Actually, I saw that in one of the groups as well today. One of the mums saying, oh my God, the lying is really intense, and fight and flight, that kind of thing. But talking a lot about dysregulated nervous system. And I guess with lying, my son does sort of tics, but it's like facial grimaces, like weird facial reactions. And I guess that's that kind of dysregulation, like a tic, like lying, like that.
Yeah. Automatic kind of response.
Yeah. But I was going to ask, as people sort of pop their questions in or comments and things, when you were talking about understanding triggers, my struggle at the moment is, what do you do if you genuinely don't understand what's going on with your child? Because and I've given you a bit of background, but we're at a sort of stage at the moment where something's happened a few months ago and he's just shutting down, and it's manifesting in anger, in spitefulness, becoming very withdrawn, not cuddling, not reaching out, just literally changing overnight. And as a parent looking in, trying to get close, it's actually worse. And just what do you do if I don't actually understand what's going on in his head? I don't think he does either.
Yeah, I was just going to say that he probably doesn't either. I definitely found that as Daniel got older and his language skills improved, it became much easier with that communication, because he could then start to form the words. We did have many conversations where I came away no wiser, and he tried to explain things to me. Another thing that you could do sometimes, if he's not even managing to kind of explain it to you in words, maybe something like drawing. I don't know if that may work for him. Often children can kind of show us how they're feeling in drawing. I'm a drawing and talking practitioner as well, and I know that a lot of kind of trauma and that kind of thing can come out through drawing. Now, you don't need to be qualified in that, but possibly if you gave him the opportunity to draw or to make something, or to sometimes as well, it's kind of having those conversations in a very unpressured way. So I would do the whole thing of sitting across the table. Okay, now we need to talk about this kind of thing. Never ever works, still doesn't work to this day. But if we're driving in the car and I just kind of bring something up, it's much easier for him to have a conversation because he's not looking at me. So it feels less pressurized. If we took the dog for a walk, that would be another way. But, you know, when we first did that, he was walking the dog with his headphones on, wouldn't say a word, hood up, headphones on. And now we've kind of got to a point where the headphones are left at home and we'll have a conversation as we walk. So it's kind of finding whatever works for him and for you that just makes it less pressured. And I think probably I say a lot of questions, and I don't mean that in kind of a, you know, not like the Spanish Inquisition, which I can sometimes be like, tell me this, why is this, that kind of thing. It's in a much more chilled out kind of way, and just sort of reading him and seeing when might be best to ask the question, or how might be best to ask it. You know, you'll know him best and you'll know when that kind of thing might come out. For Daniel, it was often as I was turning out the light after we'd said goodbyes, good nights, had stories, just about to turn off the lights, and suddenly it was like, oh, can I just tell you something that happened today? And it was kind of, you know, in your heart, you're going, oh, please, I just need space and time. But if that's the time that works for them, then, you know, that's what you have to be prepared to give them.
Yeah, ours is definitely on a long journey, just the two of us in the car, or at bed, pushing me away the whole day, and then at night wants me on his bed. Are you going yet? And then the guilt trip of, oh, you never want to spend time with me. I'm like, oh my God, I've been trying all day. And now it's like 9:45. Yeah, that classic. Thank you very much. That's amazing. And also I know we connected because of self-care, didn't we? That was our kind of initial chat, because what I do for my clients is I help busy mums and women sort of really support their nutritional intake and their self-care with wellbeing programs. And that's why I love, you know, asking, you know, yourself and other people to come and do guest talks, because I think so many people are struggling. And the self-care, you say about the oxygen mask, you know, you can't pour from an empty cup. And I think as parents to children with additional needs, it's draining. And I did my post today, and I just said, you know, it's so lovely to talk to parents that get it, because parenting's hard anyway, but when your child makes demands on you from the minute they wake up to when they go to bed, and it's so intense and complex, it's that pressure cooker. It builds and builds day after day, and you just, you know, you drag yourself through the weekend to just go again the next day. It's a different relentlessness, very exhausting, very rewarding, but hard work. And I think it's very important to look after ourselves. And I also think that connecting with people who might be able to really resonate as well.
Absolutely. There's no other support. I think I said that to you when we did talk. Even now, when I can talk to another parent who just gets it, I don't have to justify my actions. I don't have to explain why I did something. They just accept it because they know how hard it can be. There's nothing more supportive than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just having a little look at the comments and stuff. I know Lynn was, her daughters are 16 and 13, so she's finding them becoming quite secretive, which makes it then really hard to help them. But she's finding texting, using mobile phone, just communicating through that. And I guess it's like having them in the back of the car where they haven't got to look at you. It's that, you know, if you're texting, it's a conversation, but it's not that pressured.
Absolutely.
So that's quite interesting.
That's a really good one. And we had exactly the same, where Daniel actually said to me, he said, when you call me for dinner, will you just text me? And I was like, I'll absolutely not text you. You are just in the same house. I will come to your bedroom door and tell you that it's time to come for dinner. And I didn't have a clue how confrontational he found that. Even now, if you literally stand and ask him to do something, he will say, go away and I'll do it. He cannot do it while you are there. The demand is just too big. And again, you know, that's an expectation. Other people will go, what? That's ridiculous. You just tell him, kind of thing. But you just have to learn to let go of those and do what works for your family. So now I text him and then he comes for dinner and it works well. And if there's a difficult conversation to be had, exactly the same thing he'll say, can we have this conversation by text? And your immediate reaction is, I don't want to have it by text. I want to be able to chat to you. But actually what we find is we have the first bit by text and then he comes through and then we can have the rest in person. So it's just finding ways, and you only find those ways by making mistakes. So you get it wrong and then you find something else that works. There's no easy fix for everything. You just have to work it through and find what works.
Interesting, isn't it? And getting rid of those social expectations, because that's a big one, I think, for a lot of us. Louisa was saying that she uses play as a way for her. It really helps. Lego figures, role play. And she wouldn't have thought about that, the removal of the demand, which everything you said, I'm like questioning myself and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, it's nice because it's new ideas. It's different ways of thinking about things, for sure. Does anybody have anything else? There's been people watching on Facebook as well, which has been really good. So if anybody else has any other questions, Kerry, removing social expectations is great to remember. It's a big one, that pressure, and especially being in the school system as well. That kind of, oh my God, they're so behind. Oh my God, that's me anyway. It's like, oh my God, how are they going to keep up? And I know we were talking about this, and I love talking to Shelley because her son's 6 years older and she's been there, done it, got the t-shirt, and was just so like, oh, don't worry, you know, it'll all. And I was like, okay, all right, you know, because you worry, you know, secondary school's a minefield, and how are they going to navigate that? And Lynn says the ticks change and move, and if you ignore them, they do reduce. They appear to have a shelf life. Because I noticed that we have different nuances. Probably every 4 to 6 months, something new becomes the obsession, whether it's table tennis at the moment, but similarly with picking skin or trimming hair, and just weird things like that. So Lynn says her Synco is amazing. Eldest is doing her GCSEs, which is amazing.
Just to pick up there on what Kerry commented, she said her child is teasing and calling people names and he can't stop being mean. I think we see this really often. There's obviously that saying, isn't there, hurt people. And I think when it goes back to that same kind of thing of when you feel unheard or you feel out of control or you feel overwhelmed, you kind of try to claw back the control from somewhere. So however you can get it, you're going to get it back from there. And if that means if you feel that maybe you've been picked on or you've been unfairly treated, a way to get some of that control back is to take that out on somebody else, maybe somebody that you feel is kind of lower in the order than you are. So it's kind of looking at that and looking beyond that. I have no doubt, Kerry, that your child is not a mean, horrible child. Absolutely not. They will be feeling something which is meaning that that's their way of reacting to it. And if you can have that conversation with them and kind of ask them, how are you feeling? Get that language going, get that discussion going. And it isn't easy in the beginning, that discussion, when the language, when they're younger and that language is not there, it is really difficult to get out of them what's, how they're feeling and what's going on for them, but persevere. Because the more you do it, the more they'll be able to explain it to you, and you just get those channels of communication open, and that's the connection. Then they know that they can come to you and talk to you about things, and that you will not sit in judgment on them. You will, be open and be willing to help them, and I think that's just absolutely vital for them.
Yeah, amazing. Because I always remember, they say, like, bullies, for example, tend to be the most unhappiest children, and it's, some attention is better than no attention kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I've really felt that with my child. Sort of, he would rather have negative attention than not get attention at all. And I saw a quote today, actually, that I sent to one of the mums, and it said, the children who need love the most will always ask for it in the most unloving ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm seeing that a lot more. I'm finding it very difficult with his brother, the sibling. He can be really nasty towards him. And I think that was one other thing I was going to ask you. For children, like with ADHD especially, I'm hearing it a lot from other parents. For me, the worry is the extremely low self-esteem, low confidence, low sense of self-worth. And no matter what I say, I'll be like, oh, well, I'm rubbish, there's no point. And I think because his self-esteem is so low, that sort of heaviness he pushes onto other people. So then he will, with his brother, be mean. Have you got any tips for low self-esteem and that sort of low confidence?
I think, again, one of the things that we can try to do is we try to kind of then heap praise on them. And for a lot of our neurodivergent young people, they just absolutely hate that. I used to kind of do that with Daniel, and he would say things like, oh, you're just my mom, that you have to say that, or other people don't think that. Or he would literally just cringe if I gave him a compliment or said he was good at something. He didn't like it as well at all. I think probably the best thing that I learned was almost to recognize them as a person. So it's recognition maybe rather than praise, but almost recognition for something about them. So, just, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. I've noticed how kind you were to your cousin when she wasn't feeling well, or I've noticed how carefully you stroked the dog when you knew that they weren't well, anything like that. But it's just the recognition of those tiny things, and almost doing it in a really not a big way, not making a big fuss about it, just a small comment, and leave that with them. Almost don't even expect a response. And I think it's just that tiny drip feeding of that recognition, almost saying, I see you, I see how kind you are, I see how hard you try, I see how generous you were with your sweets, whatever it happens to be. Just that noticing and that recognition. And I think for neurodivergent people, that big praise really goes against it. And if you feel bad about yourself, the last thing you need is other people telling you how great you are, because you won't believe it. But it's just that tiny drip feeding of that recognition, and then hopefully he will begin to believe it himself as well. Yeah. And obviously celebrating those strengths as well, but again, in quite an understated way, kind of just noticing, Daniel is really good at problem solving. So if the opportunity comes up and he kind of asks a really in-depth question, or he solves a problem in a really creative way, I just kind of make a little comment like, wow, that was a brilliant way to think about it. I didn't think about it that way, and leave it at that. But if I say anything more than that, then you get the kind of, oh, don't sort of say that kind of thing to me. So I think it's just that drip feeding which helps.
Amazing, thank you. I'm aware of the time. We've gone a little bit over, but it's just been so useful. A couple of little comments. Louisa says, writing it in little notes for them to wake up to in their room. Lynn, I keep praising, and even if they don't believe it, that's my opinion. Pick up on when they show empathy and appreciate that, and say thank you, because factual affirmations, and I know Paul earlier said using humour and play can really help deflect and reset tensions for everybody. And I know, like last night, I was asking for a hug and he wouldn't give it, so I just jumped on top of him and gave him a massive kiss, and he started laughing. So I think just that sort of thing, keeping questions open. And the other thing as well, which I know they do a lot in hypnotherapy and stuff as well, is asking what's going well instead of what's going wrong. So tell me something great about today, and what was something good that happened. So getting their brain to pick up on the positive messages instead of the negative, because our brains will always find truth in what we're trying to tell them. Absolutely amazing, Shelley. So just tell me quickly, how can people reach out to you? And yeah, I mean, do you do like free discovery calls or courses? Yeah.
Yeah, we just I have a free Facebook group that just kind of have chats with people in there, put in posts, share information, that kind of thing. So just trying to create that supportive community. So that's the free Facebook group, and then we're actually going to start the course, which is centered around these 3 elements. Is going to start rolling out at kind of the end of April, and that I'm going to deliver it online and in person. Obviously in person for people who live locally, but online for people who aren't in the vicinity. And yeah, that'll be a 6-week course, and we'll just kind of go into a lot more detail about the understanding, the communication and the connection, and then kind of give people time to sort of work things out for their family as well, because that's really important to me, that it's no prescription that you take away and this is exactly what you do. You work out how to take that back to your family.
Absolutely amazing. And when they come in the Facebook group, you can get a really lovely newsletter from Shelley, like just little emails of tidbits. It's really, really good. I loved it this week. So what we'll do, Kerry, so what's the Facebook page called?
It's Complex Connections, and connections is with 2 N's and an X.
Yeah.
The CT. So Complex Connections is the Facebook page, same for the website. Yeah. And then the free Facebook group, if you go onto the Complex Connections page, you'll see a link to the free Facebook group.
Awesome. And yeah, Shelley, if you can post all of this, do a post in our Facebook group. Kerry, Denise, if you're not in my little Facebook group all about health and self-care, let me know and I'll add you in, and you can see this live and things like that. And yeah, I'll also message out the recording to I've made a note of people who wanted them and who's on the call tonight. So I'll send you the recording and Shelley's personal kind of email and details, but that would be amazing. And then you can reach out and just give her your feedback, get in touch. You know, it's all about sharing and connecting, isn't it? So yeah, but a huge thank you to you, Shelley, for giving up your evening tonight, and to everybody that came on, tuned in, listened. I really hope you found that empowering. I know I've taken some notes, just some new things that we can try, new understanding, new ways of thinking, really, really important. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It's been lovely to be with all of you tonight.
No, it's been amazing. Well done, Shelley. Thank you so much, darling. Great.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.